Welcome back. We're all familiar with President Obama's time in the White House, but how did he get there? A little refresher course. He was born in Hawaii in 1961, where his mother was a student at the University of Hawaii. He moved to Indonesia. He attended Occidental College in LA and then Columbia University in New York. He then moved to Chicago to work as a community organizer. In 1988, he enrolled at Harvard, where he was the first black president of the Harvard Law Review. He became a civil rights attorney and a lecturer at the University of Chicago Law School. He was elected to the Illinois State Senate in 1996 and passed nearly 300 bills during his time there. In 2004, he was elected to the U.S. Senate. In 2008, he was elected the first black president of the United States. Here to discuss his 2 terms in office is Susan Nylon, of media consultant with Nylon and Associates, Frank Patty, the secretary for the Republican Party of Sarasota, and Steve Sabato, director of community engagement for ABC 7 News. Thank you all for being here tonight. Susan, you have me interested because all day on Facebook you said there is something you want to say tonight that you have been wanting to say for 8 years. What is it?
Well, you know, I thought about it 8 years ago because it was a very rough period in time when Barack Obama was elected. And very much like we have experienced right now with all the political rhetoric and how nasty and everything it became, there was a lot of fear-mongering during the entire 2008 campaign election. There was a litany of things that they said was going to happen when it happened. He was a Muslim, he wasn't born in the United States, he was going to turn us into a socialist country, et cetera, et cetera. And I sat patiently and waited the whole time to see if there was any remote possibility that some of that could be true, and it isn't. And now we are at the end of his term, his second term, and I can honestly say, going back and looking, that none of that came true. None of the programs that he put forth turned this country in any direction except for a positive way.
Frank, I don't know if you read our viewer comments a lot, but you know, I can't tell you how often that I heard comments that he was going to come and take all our guns away, that he was going to install Sharia law, that he wasn't even born in this country. You should not have to speak for the entire Republican Party, but none of that did happen, although a lot of Obama bashers, you know, would say this all the time.
It was said we didn't take to the streets and riot when he got in. We didn't go in giant protests when he got in. We did not stay away from the inauguration when he got in. You had a small group saying that with loud mouths. I agree. The vast majority of the people I know weren't saying that. They didn't like him. But I'll tell you something, most of the ones I knew said, no, I don't like him, but let's give him a chance. He's the first African-American president. Let's hope everything turns out all right.
You know, a lot of Republican members of Congress didn't announce they were not going to his inauguration, but a number of them did not. I don't have that number, but
it was very small.
Stay away.
It was a handful, and one of them had a stroke, and he couldn't make it.
Steve, we asked you to be on tonight because you don't have a dog in this fight. I mean, you care deeply about this country. I know that. We've talked about that. But you're not a Republican. You're not a Democrat. So how do you see this?
Well, I see it from a larger perspective in terms of where the country was when President Obama came into office. And I feel that at the time the pendulum swang back towards the left, and we had 2 terms of Republican president, and I think now, after 8 years, the pendulum has swung back in the other direction.
Well, what do you mean by that? Because I know that a lot of Republicans don't like people talking about this, but Hillary Clinton did win the vote by almost 3 million votes. So what pendulum swung in what direction?
Well, I think we saw 8 years ago when President Obama took office, the country had grown weary of war. They wanted out. They wanted out of Iraq. They wanted out of Afghanistan, and that was a promise that the president made.
Yet we are still in Iraq and still in Afghanistan.
But not actively in combat in the same way that we were. He made it very clear that he wanted a national health plan. So from my perspective, this is a changing of the guard, and our country is strong, and we'll get through this.
There's just a little bit more to talk about here. So we're going to take a break and come back and talk about President Obama's legacy coming up, along with a check on our forecast with Bob. Back in a moment. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we're discussing President Obama's 8 years in office and the legacy he leaves behind. Our guest tonight, our media consultant Susan Nylon, Frank Patti of the Republican Party of Sarasota, and ABC 7 Community Engagement Director Steve Sabato. Steve, I know you watched the president's news conference yesterday, and you have some feelings about his intellect, and I want you to compare it to the torch being passed to the new president and that kind of stylistic difference.
Yeah, well, I was struck by two things. One just in terms of his style of communication. You know, we're in for a 180-degree turn here in terms of tone and in terms of how the president communicates. So I was struck by his demeanor, his thoughtfulness. And contrasted by a much more intuitive kind of gut speaker that President-elect Trump is. But even more than that, I was most impressed by the door that President Obama left open for for his voice in the future. I don't think we've heard the last I don't think he'll be involved in a day-to-day basis in partisan politics, but he laid down a set of circumstances and situations under which he would speak up.
Frank, what about that? He, as Steve said, that he is leaving the door open to talking about the issues that he cares about in a way that might be more obvious than other former presidents.
I think probably he will be involved. As for demeanor, as you recall, Chamberlain was very different than Churchill, and FDR was very different in their demeanors than Truman. So that really doesn't play into the fact. I think each president will have his own style, basically, with it. But within what he said, being involved, yes, I imagine he would. But there is a has been sort of a tradition that the former president doesn't jump into the thing. I mean, Carter broke that, jumping into the pool when he doesn't like what's being said or being done. I think that Obama probably will break that tradition, and I think that's going to be a problem.
Susan, you say it's going to be a problem, but yeah. Susan, I think that a lot of Democrats believe there are no longer any rules.
Correct. We don't have a tradition anymore. We broke it with this election. And whereas once we used to count on certain things, I think we've learned that we can't count on things anymore. Let's also consider the fact that Obama is the youngest president to actually leave office. He still has a lot to do and a lot to say. He's not looking to retire. Now, he has hinted that he's going to do more business-oriented things. But I can tell you the progressive movement is still considering him their leader. And I don't see him passing that up.
Well, a couple of things there. Do they consider him their leader because the Democrats were basically wiped out in this election and there is no obvious person to point to in terms of the leader of whether it's the progressive wing of the Democratic Party or any other wing?
As if Clinton had won, would there have been a need for Obama? And I will tell you that I think for the most part, even if Clinton had won, there was still the need for Obama and Biden to still stay engaged. They made a really good team, and they presented a lot of things very well. And as Steve pointed out, they're incredibly eloquent, they're very passionate, and a lot of what they said resonated. So I still think they would have played a part in it. Maybe not as large of a part, but I still think they do.
Frank, was Barack Obama a good president?
This will kill a lot of people, but no, I don't think so. I can give you an entire list of his failures from Benghazi, going through Iraq when he pulled the troops out and left that big void. Iran, which we've gotten nothing for, and we've had this thing that Iran won't build nukes. Well, Iran also works with North Korea, and they do build nukes.
But I'm going to push back.
Yeah.
He inherited a depression that he did not create. He got very little help in terms of pulling the country out of that near depression. He got bin Laden.
Okay, you got Bin Laden. The Depression, at first it was a recession. It wasn't a depression.
We were on the verge of a depression.
Yeah, well, that's debatable.
Not really.
Yeah, well, we don't agree. Basically, what he got was, and Bush got it, but you have to remember the Democrats were in control of the Congress for 2 years, before that. Plus the fact that the way he went about getting it out was wrong. First, he did not rescue the auto workers. He could have gone into Chapter 11 in GM. They could have done the same thing without the government pushing all that money and putting the union basically in control.
Steve, is the problem with our politics these days is neither side has an ability to give the other side credit where credit is due sometimes?
Well, I think what we're seeing is that that we have become so polarized that civility and the ability to compromise and get things done are part of this change that we're witnessing right now. We're seeing, I think, the beginning of a new way of communicating, the impact of social media and technology on this election and on how people communicate. It cannot be overestimated.
And Susan, many people do look at the election of Donald Trump as a repudiation to the presidency of Barack Obama, and that is something that Democrats have to deal with.
Oh yeah, you know, I'm not sitting here and saying that he was 100% the best thing ever. I mean, there are things that I disagree about.
Like what?
Surveillance, how he dealt with the NSA, the fact that he, reestablished the Patriot Act or allowed it to continue. There was a lot of things that I had issue with, how he handled the drilling and the licensing and things like that. But, in any relationship, there's going to be some downfalls, there's going to be disappointments. But if you look back and you see all that he accomplished and all the people that he helped, we have the least amount of people that are without health insurance right now. I think it's like 8.9%. We've never had that before. 20 million people have signed up for the ACA. And I never in my lifetime thought that would be done. I mean, I was remembering when Hillary Clinton was trying to get that done when Bill was in the office. And I said, that's it, we're done. But yet he's accomplished some amazing things.
Frank, I've heard some suggestion over the last couple of days as Obama has given his farewell addresses and so forth, that Obamacare may be repealed right now. But whatever the Republican Congress and President Trump do, it starts from the basis of how do we give all Americans access to health care. That was never the debate before.
First of all, the ACA was not a good plan. And I know plans because I've designed them. And the health plan I'm under right now, I wrote. Number one, it had no cost control, basically, except you and the people to raise taxes. Number two, it paid the insurance companies if they lost money. And I will guarantee you every insurance company will have it on their books that they lost money. If they had set it up differently, they set it up for the tail to wag the dog. Had they gone out there taking from each state, taking away the rules, stopping it, letting them pull together, then setting up risk pools and taking the people out. Now, 20 million people is a little ridiculous because you don't know how many were forced into there.
I see we have a little bit more to discuss.
Okay.
But let's take a quick break. And when we return, we'll have final thoughts from our guests. Plus, what some of our viewers are saying about last night's topic, the closing of the Ringling Brothers Circus. Welcome back. As President Obama leaves the White House, how will he be remembered? Our guests join us now for final thoughts. Susan, how will Barack Obama be remembered?
If you don't look into the decisions he made in office, if you just look at him as a president, and I'm only saying that because I don't want to spend the time arguing whether we agree or disagree about it. You have to look at the fact that he has handled himself with an amazing amount of poise and grace in an incredible amount of adversity. I don't know any president in my history or beyond that has actually been like that. His popularity numbers are up, and they're up for a good reason. And I think that, how he handled his family and how he conducted himself showed that he was earnest and sincere in really wanting to do a good job.
Is Susan right or wrong?
Some degree right, some degree wrong. He will be remembered as the first African-American president, and that's a great accomplishment, and that we finally broke that barrier in it, too. As a family man, yes, he's a fine family man, and he's a decent person, but I don't think he was honest with the American public for the most part. I think he told them too many things that weren't true, and you can easily look that up. And I think he'll be remembered as the first African-American president, and I don't know about his accomplishments. Only history is going to see what happens.
Steve, if you like your doctor, you could keep him. Yeah, I mean, in retrospect,
Yeah.
is that a real problem?
I think first he'll be remembered, history will remember him as our first black president. But second, I think he will be remembered for advancing the rights of certain minorities and for moving the country in the direction of national health care, where we've passed a point of ever going back to where we were before he was in office.
All right, thank you all. But before we go, we want to share with you what some of our viewers are saying about the end of the greatest show on earth. This weekend, Feld Entertainment announced plans to end the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus after 146 years. The company blames increasing production costs and the drop in ticket sales after elephants were dropped from the show. The circus has shaped the cultural landscape of the Suncoast, and we asked you how you are reacting to the news. Stephen Philippi says, I was sad. It's part of the American culture. Future generations won't understand the joy it brought to us. Fran Quinn writes, I am so happy about this. Love animals, and I'm sick of these poor circus animals had to endure. I am sorry for the workers who are losing their jobs, but they will find other work eventually. These animal lives were taken from them. And Nancy Allen writes, I have mixed feelings about the closing of this dynamic show. Although I do feel for the animals. I am sure they will retire to a great animal haven. The animals need to have a real presence to the public. They are too beautiful to let fade away. Did the Obama administration have an impact on your life? Obamacare, cash for clunkers, the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Let us know by visiting our Facebook page at facebook.com/news@7. And FYI, want to watch past Roundtable discussions? They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. Thanks to our guests for being here tonight. Susan Nylon is a media consultant for Nylon and Associates. Frank Patty is the secretary for the Republican Party of Sarasota, and Steve Sabato is the director of community engagement for ABC 7 News.